Thanks for tuning into this very special broadcast from Bloomberg Quint. Elections done and dusted, back to fundamentals. What is top of mind of some of the most important minds when they look at the economy, business, and thereby the markets as well? Very eminent voice, Mr. Vallabh Bhanshali of Enam joins us right now on the show. Mr. Bhanshali, good having you. Thanks so much for taking the time out. I would reckon it's back to fundamentals because the mandate seems to be of continuity. What is it? What is your first reaction when you look at this mandate? Because, you know, different people have stated different things. Some are looking at 2020 and looking at how there'll be majority both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and therefore the pace of reforms picks up post that. Some are looking at the reforms that have already been put in and believe that continuity is the only thing that they're watching out for. What is it that you're watching out for?
I think there are two things. One, the alternative was very scary. Secondly, they thought that Modi started on an agenda which was incomplete. And people wanted to go to the next level. And the next level is bringing about a fundamental change in the way the country has looked at itself, economically, the segments of society, our culture, and our position in the world. So I think it's continuity in the sense of, you know, not having somebody else. But I think more than that, I think building on the platform that was laid in the first 5 years. And that's how my expectation of Mr. Modi is that this is an never before opportunity and maybe never after opportunity to really project India and tap its potential the way it should be.
Why do you say that, sir? Never after one? And if indeed that is indeed the belief, what are the 3 or 4 most important things according to you which have to be enacted? Difficult steps, but which have to be taken in order to make use of this never before, never after opportunity that you mentioned?
Say, for example, our independence had to mean the most to our poor people and left out people. But we had to do it in a manner which was not based on reckless subsidies, which were stolen on a massive scale, without, you know, not looking at poor as poor, but looking at them as a part of our society, to do it with dignity. And so I think when we started with a program like toilets and Swachhata and Ujjwala, I think this was a massive connect, and that's what we need to build on. We have a program, Modi has a program of 6,000 rupees a year, but it is a very, very small amount. How do we bring about a change in the way we think of the poor, we think of rural areas, we think of the agricultural economy? There are massive issues and opportunities there. Say, for example, unless we think of water in a very significant manner, India will be in serious trouble. Related to water is the energy issue, because the way energy was not being paid for, or we have sucked up the ground level water by using excessive energy which was available cheap, and so on. Related issues are also health. Say, for example, the kind of food that we eat and how do we bring about a change in that. So these are massive problems, but we just looked at rural areas as vote banks and, you know, doing lip service. We need to bring about a massive change in that. It is extraordinary that Mr. Modi used a very, very new phrase yesterday. He said that our country has only 2 communities or 2 sections, those who are left out and those who are trying to help those who are left out by, you know, helping them. I think this is a momentous statement. What he has said is that it is a businessman in industry who can help poor come out of it. So I expect the second part is to look at business de novo, not as someone who were a necessary evil or who were partners with, you know, the so-called crony capitalism structure. So I think we need to look at this in a fundamental way. How do we bring lower interest rates, lower tax rates? How do we really remove friction in doing business? We have a massive opportunity in relocating businesses from China, in the enabled further by the U.S.-China, the strife. And so I think this is a massive opportunity. I think the work is cut out for Mr. Modi, and it's massive amount of work.
Mr. Bhanshali, not a skeptic really, but somebody who looks at what other economies have done as well, and I would want your thoughts here, wherein agriculture income is a structural deflation of sorts, and whether putting more money to work behind a sector wherein incomes by and large won't rise, would it be prudent to maybe focus on industrialization, mobilize the disguised unemployment out of agriculture into that pocket? Or would you believe that this 6,000 per year amount has to be increased, because that's a lot of money going behind trying to reflate the rural economy where the basic income will not in all probability move up in a hurry?
No, that's not what I mean at all. But is this because we haven't imagined enough about it? So the momentum or the velocity of money that goes into rural area is very, very different, and I don't have to tell you about it. So I think when you spend on rural infrastructure, when you build the confidence of the rural people, the impact it has is very different. So I'm not so much on industrialization as on urbanization. I think industrialization was an evolution in our human history. And for the first time, probably in the 17th century or 18th century, the way it was looked at was different. China was able to create steady jobs. I think we think of industrialization as being very important because it created a kind of job. Maybe that a kind of job at a time when the consumer is no more loyal to anything. Our tastes are changing very fast. Our loyalty to everything is changing very fast. It's a, Internet 3.0 world or 4.0 world where we'll have to think of flexible manufacturing, flexible jobs, and urbanization enables that definitely. I think the way our startups have shown promise, we got to build massively on it and involve them in solving some of these problems and creating new designs. I think you may have heard about a group called Indus Group or India Stack that has given us Aadhaar and RuPay and so on. We need to form several such groups who will look at these not in the traditional manner that we need industrialization only, or if you send money to poor people, it just means more doles and fiscal indiscipline and so on. I firmly believe that there are solutions which lie beyond it. Say, for example, drip irrigation. We haven't thought about it enough. The drip irrigation is so expensive. But just as the cost of solar power has come down in India massively, why can't we bring down the cost of drip irrigation? And then, we have agricultural surplus at the current prices also. So I think given our scientific fervor, given what some of the people in India have done, given the out-of-box thinking possibility with Mr. Modi and his government, I think de novo thinking about both the business and industrial world, our urbanization structures, the way they created competition for smart cities and so on, I think a whole new way of administering the country, to thinking of the country, I think will happen. Not only is it necessary, but I think it will happen because the political sensitivity which Mr. Modi rightly had about winning 2019 election has gone down. This man has got no fetters now, and I think he's going to play full throttle.
Okay. Do you worry, Mr. Bhanshali, about what is arguably used as demographic dividend, having a spot of bother? I've heard you mention this in the past, and which is I want to ask this to you. The last 3-4 months have shown some bit of sputtering of the consumption super cycle that we seem to be in. A lot of queries about, or a lot of questions about how the job situation is shaping up. The agrarian youth is coming in and becoming a Swiggy delivery boy or Uber driver, but the meaningful jobs are not getting created. Will that lead to some bit of slowing down in the consumption economy, signs of which we have probably started to see?
I think a lot of the answers to what you are saying probably lie in Bombay and not in Delhi. I think if you look at the whole liquidity situation, the way banking has been put under tremendous stress, first by complete neglect, then by reckless, trying to resolve the NPA issues, putting the banks in trouble before we thought of solutions for them, and the aggregate liquidity and interest rates. If we have positive interest rates of the kind that we have, we are amongst the worst in the world. How can we really have demand growth? So what is the inflation? So I think some of the people have to come out of their academic ivory towers, look at the reality, and inflation is a welcome product everywhere else in the world, maybe not as much in India. But something endemic has changed, and we haven't even caught up with it. So I think the economy has been starved of liquidity, and the cost of liquidity in a massive way, on the pretext that transmission is not happening, and this is not happening, that's not happening, this fear, that fear, while massive negligence was, is evident. So I think a lot has to improve on that front. Clearly, we need tremendous amount of coordination now between the government, the central bank, the bureaucracy, and other wings of the government. I think the whole nation has said that we believe in this policy of the Modi Sarkar. We believe in this leader. Please all come together and deliver for us. Whether that happens because it's not a democratic process, I think it's an appeal that people seem to have made. I hope that happens.
Well, all of us certainly hope for that. Mr. Bhansali, just a small, not a counter really, but a throwback at your point. When you speak to some of the mid-sized bankers, and you use the term pretext of transmission not happening, they mention that in the real sense, if we see the last few rate actions that have happened, the transmission has not happened, and there are some issues as a result of which one large bank or two large banks just dropping the rates a little bit or upping the rates a little bit, and the deposits go there, and therefore they are not able to cut rates in a meaningful way. Do you reckon that if indeed the Reserve Bank takes large dollops of rate actions in a short time, we could finally see the transmission indeed happening?
So let's look at the overall situation over the last 3 years. We had demonetization, then we had GST, then we had NCLT rollout, then we had the elections come upon us. We had 2 bad years in terms of agricultural crop and the rural distress. So there were many, many negatives also that were playing out, negatives which were probably necessary fallout of reform moves. But in between, economy showed a lot of promise. Now, this is a chicken and egg story. I mean, we don't have a perfect world. We don't have perfect transmission of policy, of laws, of intent, of administrative appointments, and so on. So there are many, many interferences in this whole process. So therefore, to think of an ideal world. So for example, take this transmission business. I think one has to, and Neeraj, you and your group are ideally suited to look at some of the encumbrances that the banks have to suffer on the liquidity that comes their way. Look at also the fear that, what is the cost of credit that they can manage. They have to manage their balance sheet and P&L both at the same account, same time. And there are many, many liquidity soakers in the system. That there are, restrictions on, the usage of of deposits. If you look at the micromanagement of the treasuries that the banks have to do, there are many difficulties. So I think it is a time where we don't have perfect solution. We have to learn and be inspired by what US and Europe did. Draghi made a famous statement, I will do what it takes. US didn't even say it, but they went ahead and did it. So when you see a large problem, you think of the problem as a country. You don't think of textbooks. Every time it rhymes, but it plays out differently. So I think we need to think of this not in a classical textbook manner, but in the given situation, that what the mood of the country is, what its potential is, and then you do experiment, you do take some risks with the caveats that, okay, let's do this for 3 months, 6 months, and what is the worst that will happen? So I think our economy definitely needs a kickstart. To think that, we have demographic dividend and it's a market for next 30 years, and then worry too much about the next 3 months, 6 months, I think is not right. There's something contradictory there.
Okay. So do you reckon, Mr. Bhansali, I mean, when we speak to almost every industrialist or every SME rather, everybody's talking about one big crunch, and that is the immediate liquidity crunch. Would you, in your wisdom, believe that injecting dollops of liquidity in whichever shape or form the government does is the immediate need of the hour? And will that be done, to your mind?
I think this is the #1 requirement. There is no doubt about it. If the whole world saying it, only 2 or 3 or 5 people saying, no, this is not necessary, we have this fear, I'm afraid something is missing. This is the #1 requirement.
Okay. Pose that, Mr. Bhansali, I'm not asking you to really talk about what will happen to the markets per se, but we've seen this disconnect between what's happening to the economy versus what's happening to the markets. Do you believe that even if the economy takes some time to mend itself, because economic mending doesn't happen in a bit of a hurry, because there's a bit of a disconnect, if earnings growth comes back in a world wherein investors are starved of earnings growth per se, the markets will be sanguine irrespective of how long it takes for the economy to mend itself?
Neeraj, it never happens. Markets are pragmatic, at least pragmatic in the long term. In the short term, there may be euphoria or liquidity issue. Liquidity is what we call spurts, which may make the market behave in a certain manner. But the market has to be pragmatic. It will always be international factors. It will be earnings. It will be quality of earnings. It will be policy initiatives, current events, all of them shaping the market. And that, I hope, never changes. Then we don't have a market. So I think all of that is important. But then, we have seen companies, last and survive all kinds of disruptions. So when you see managements and you see businesses with moats, people continue to abide faith in them. And we have several of them. Fortunately, the investable basket of such companies has grown very nicely over the last 20, 30 years. So I think you're going to see both some of these strong management businesses with moats and some of the others who are more affected by the immediate earnings outlook. And it's just a wonderful market in that sense.
That it is. So I get a sense that Vallabh Bhanshali, the economy watcher, is a lot more sanguine about what will happen over the next 5-year term. Is Vallabh Bhanshali, the man who watches global and local markets as well, a lot more sanguine than what he has been in the preceding 1 year?
Absolutely.
Okay. Last
Absolutely.
couple of...
So I think,
Please continue.
It's not right to discuss my portfolio position,
Not
but
at all.
I think we are itching to put money to work.
No, not at all. I mean, okay, itching to put money to work. Fair call. I didn't want to really talk about the portfolio position any which ways. Just last couple of questions, Mr. Bhanshali. One is, would you believe that some of the reforms that were enacted, and credit must be given where it's due, the government didn't think of a 5-year term coming to an end when they thought of implementing GST. They implemented it even though the term was just about 1.5 years or 2 years left. Do you think some of those measures which were implemented midway through the term will start bearing immediate results, or is it too difficult to predict about what will happen to the buoyancy in tax collections over the course of the next 12 to 18 months?
Not at all. I think GST has been amongst the most spectacular achievements of this government. I think soon you will find papers around the world writing about that, how India's GST is probably the best in the world ever. So just as we did RuPay and Aadhaar, the GST has been an amazing success. If you go around the country, the murmur and the complaint against GST is almost died down. GST is working smoothly. People have found new business models to deal with GST. Things have spooned up. And this is going to be a massive benefit to the economy. I mean, it has brought down inflation. This is the only government in the world of some significance which has won an election after ruling out GST and which did not cause inflation. So these are extraordinary achievements for which all of us should be proud, because GST was not done by only this government, but every political party in every state joined in. So it is our success, and we haven't rejoiced enough about it. So I think definitely we are going to get massive rewards both of GST and to some extent even demonetization, because I think the whole do number ka model is broken forever.
So
it will be there in some measure everywhere, but think of do number ka business only, I think that is gone forever.
Okay, so you reckon, Mr. Bhanshali, that or you are optimistic about the, not really the exact numbers, but the kind of ballpark numbers that the government is estimating in terms of tax buoyancy for FY20?
I think we need this liquidity boost to the economy. So I think if all these things happen in unison and coordination and we have a reasonable monsoon, not that it is as important as it used to be, but at this point of time, we need all the shots going together. Okay. So I think so.
On that note, Mr. Bhanshali, take a moment to thank you for joining in today and speaking to us. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Neil.
And viewers, thanks for tuning into this very special broadcast on Bloomberg Quint. As the vote count commences and the markets gyrate to every single vote, won or lost, Bloomberg Quint Live gets you